Hi, I'm Sarah Johnson from the Karen Organization of Minnesota. I'm actually here in place of our Executive Director and our Development Coordinator because they're both out of town this week.
Good morning, I'm Christina McCoy and I'm with Community Action of Minneapolis. I'm Katie Fitzpatrick and I'm the Development and Communications Coordinator at American Indian OIC. I'm Kay Anderson. I'm a fundraising consultant who's here representing 2 different refugee organizations.
Good morning. I'm Leah Faber. I'm the Executive Director of the Fred Wells Tennis and Education Center.
Hello, I'm Mario Hernandez. I'm the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for the Latino Economic Development Center.
Hi, I'm Patricia Moen. I'm Special Projects Manager at Casa de Esperanza.
Good morning. I'm Graham Hartley. I'm the Director of Programs at Migizi Communications, a Native American educational organization in South Minneapolis.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Colden. I am representing the Native American Community Development Institute.
Hi, my name is Eloisa Chavez, and I'm the Executive Director of La Oportunidad, which means opportunity. I'm sure you
know. Good morning. My name is Min-sun Kim. I'm a Community Development Manager from Korean Service Center.
I'm Andrea Barsonis representing Central.
I'm Nancy Dreesen. I'm with Julie Murphy and Associates, grant writers, and representing several different organizations.
I'm Patty Tetta. I'm also an independent consultant, grant writer, and I'm here on behalf of Minnesota Minority Education Partnership.
Good morning. My name is Khadijah Ramadan. I'm here from Better Futures, Minnesota. Okay, thank you. So this morning we're scheduled to go until 11, but of course if we can get done, I'm a believer we don't have to use up all the time because the application, you'll find it's to go through this session today. We're going to go through just kind of the overview background, kind of why United Way is launching this pilot. We'll talk a little bit about the actual application, and then Tom Lance, who's also with me this morning, is going to go through the online process, because when you leave, the application is online, it's live, and ready to go. So we'll have to wait. And before I forget, let me just introduce the team that's been helping me feverishly get this ready. Melanie Dennis, Sarah Friedman, and Tom Lance. Just a rock star team back there. So we'll get started. Again, I just want to review the history of our capacity building efforts, talk a little bit about the why, and then actually get into the details on the request for application. So when I joined United Way on the community impact side, I understood that, and we still do have a strategic planning fund where those dollars had been used for agencies to apply for, to do either strategic planning, or if they were interested in doing exploration for merger acquisition, or actually doing a merger acquisition. And in 2008, what I didn't realize is that it was really established in response to a recession and to really help agencies that had been hit the hardest. And so what you'll see is that over the period of 2009 to 2013, we invested approximately $3 million. So it's, when you look at that number, but in relationship to the total CI budget, it's 1%. But what we did realize is that it was an impactful 1%. And by that I mean when we looked at how the funds were supported, you'll see that it was just general capacity building, and what I found, it was more strategic planning and less around merger implementation. In 2012, when we started to really look at what was going on, a lot of agencies have directly benefited from that capacity building fund, and then 81% for realignment and 19% for other types of funding or capacity building. This is what I found interesting with the key learnings. The average grant size was $32,500 of that when agencies were applying for capacity building. It was supporting technical assistance, but what was also interesting, if many of you participated in the United Way grant agency perception report, found that that was one of the highest rated items United Way agencies was a strategic planning fund, even though it accounts for less than 1% of our grant pool. What we also found that successful mergers happened with financially strong agencies. And then we also learned that culturally specific agencies, and how we were defining that, were agencies of color whose EDs are led by persons of color, whose staff is 50% or more persons of color, and whose mission was committed to communities of color. And what we also found is that within that agency population, the use was higher for strategic plans versus merger and acquisitions when compared to other agencies. And before I go to this slide, the other key learning, which I didn't put up here, is that as part of our study, or part of our work with MAP, when we were evaluating, one of the other key learnings that came out of the MAP study is what we found when we started looking at financial strength and positioning of all of our agencies. What we also found is that 80% of the agencies, the majority agencies, were in that merger acquisition mode and were financially strong. But what we found, it was disproportionate financial weakness in agencies of color, and not using the strategic planning fund for any other than the strategic planning. But what we also weren't able to track was what was happening after the strategic planning. So implementation of those plans is what we weren't seeing. So we weren't able to really assess how well the agencies were able to leverage those funds. But as a result of that, looking at those results, what I said to Sarah, our CEO, in taking this role, is that I felt that there was a disruption occurring in smaller agencies, smaller to mid-sized agencies, and in particular, agencies of color. And then started to think about what should United Way's role be in trying to understand what was going on and what our role should be in addressing what we were, at least what I was seeing as somewhat of a disruption. And so from all of those discussions, about a year ago, let me make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. So about a year ago, as all of the research started coming out, and of course our community impact area simultaneously was also doing community conversations. They were also doing conversations with all of our agencies. And so what was interesting is that we were starting to see parallels across the agency sector. But even in looking at the research, I have to tell any of you what's going on in terms of the demographics in our community, which is another driver behind this work. But the other piece of that is, as we were thinking about looking at the demographics, a year ago we also convened 4 different agency groups. And these were agencies that were funded by United Way, because that was the basis that we had to start. That was the only basis that we had to start from. And at that point, there were 4 different groups: African American, Latina, Southeast Asian, Native American. We unfortunately did not have a representative Somali group. So what we did do, however, through some listening and hearing sessions that we were working on, we did pose some of the same questions to a group of Somali agency leaders. But through those 4 different fundraising, those focus groups, they were asked questions like, what would agencies? Let me say this differently. They were asked what were the challenges agencies faced today in terms of delivering service, capacity building, meeting clients' needs, And we also wanted to know what was the view and perception of the United Way partnership with those. And I see some of you, Giovanni, and others were a part of those conversations. Those conversations were facilitated by an outside consultant. We also talked to other community leaders. We also talked to several of our board members to get their ideas and thoughts around what they felt were challenges or opportunities for small to mid-sized agencies. After looking and compiling all of that data, we then brought that group together again as one group to share the information that we felt they had given us, but what we wanted to do was feed it back to the group and make sure that we heard everyone correctly. And in those meetings, in that last meeting, these are the key themes that surfaced from those focus groups. Leadership development around executive directors and boards. And let me also share with you the other key theme that came out of this group as you're looking at these findings. They are not coming from a position of weakness or a deficit position. And that was important coming from those groups, that it not be viewed in that vein as well. So when we talk about leadership development, it was more around how can executive directors find the time and have the access to the intellectual capital so that they can continue to develop themselves as leaders, develop their staff, develop their boards. So it's more around having that time to really do some of the strategic kinds of things that an ED or CEO ought to be doing, and thinking about how can they also, succession planning, for instance. How do I continue to develop my team? Increase focus, and I think with leadership development, those two kind of went hand in hand. Again, having the time to really think about strategy and what the agency should be doing and what it can be most effective at. Fundraising was a big one, and when they talked about fundraising, it was not in the context of we think we ought to raise $90 million or United Way, you should open up your Rolodex. It was more about how can agencies really identify and invest in fundraising strategies themselves. What are the many agencies, when things start to go sour, they get hit, the fund development person is the first thing that goes. And what we heard was that they know that theoretically that should not be the first thing that goes, but unfortunately that's what happens. So how can we help think more intentional around fundraising? And then resource investment, this was a big one. And again, resource investment really talked about a number of things. It was that backroom support. So those infrastructure things such as HR, financial management, information technology, the IT support, marketing, a lot of those things that, again, if they were going smoothly or you had the money to really invest in them, it would make a huge difference in the ability to deliver services. Partnerships, another one that came through loud and clear, and I think it got to the point of not having the time to really invest and think about partnerships. Where and when does it make sense to partner? Who are the organizations out there that are doing similar like-kind work? And then cultural competence and responsiveness. This was more directed at United Way. And again, many agencies, just one of the reasons that we felt strongly about this is as we thought about the demographics. United Way believes that it's incumbent that there be a diverse agency sector that is healthy, strong, and that can respond to the needs of culturally specific communities. We believe that. But in doing so and working with agencies, we also recognize that we as an organization have to work on our internal cultural competence and cultural, what I'm defining as our cultural agility, the ability to work across. Investing in this initiative, it's our goal to make sure that as using about what is important to communities of color, what solutions work best, because we know that one size doesn't fit all and everything doesn't work for every culture. So as a part of this, it's certainly an opportunity for United Way to also become stronger and more responsive as we think about solutions that are needed in the community. So after we went through these focus groups, talked about it, and started thinking about what should our role or what can our role be, our idea or thought was to make a targeted investment in what we're calling culturally specific organizations or CSOs to grow capacity, new cultures, new thinking. And also, as I think about that new thinking, to help infuse how we think about our grant processes and the outcomes that might be needed. And also strengthen asset base. No question, as we think about the backroom support that will be needed for some agencies, that's going to be a key part of this, key part of the pilot. And then this next generation leadership, which also tied into the leadership development. What we were hearing from agencies, there isn't a pipeline or a solid pipeline of leaders, next generation leaders like yourselves coming into the sector. And as you just heard me talk about strengthening United Way's cultural competence and agility. So our goals are to invest $350,000 to accelerate the growth, and this think that this will be a hopefully at least at a minimum three-year goal, three-year pilot. For this first round, we'll be looking at up to 5 organizations for the pilot year. I will tell you our goal is to expand that, but as a funding organization, everything is dependent upon the ability to raise the funds to do this. So it's important to note that the $350,000 that we're launching this initiative on is coming from our strategic planning fund, which is actually out of our annual fund campaign. But right now we are looking at ways through our Centennial campaign to generate additional interest in this initiative. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. The value of the services that you'll hear us talk about, roughly $25,000 to $100,000 per organization. And as you just heard us say again, the reasoning is that we believe that your organizations play a vital role in the communities, and that's why we're making the investment. One of the things that you'll see at your table, and I was working with the consistency, working with a consultant out of New York who actually is working with Megan Barp and her CI team on the education RFP, so we have consistencies there. But you'll see at New York, the state of New York is also making a similar investment in nonprofit agencies to build capacity. The other area that I'm aware of, that we're aware of, where this work is being done is in the state of California. And it's been done, they've been doing this work for some time through the Liberty Hill Foundation and the California Wellness Foundation, where they've made investments up to $5 million in what they also refer to as culturally specific agencies. So today, those are the areas that I'm aware of. We have been in conversation with the Liberty Hill Foundation to learn how they did this, how they granted the money, and how they selected the agencies. So they were quite helpful in helping me structure this. The desired outcomes that we have listed here are just a few, and I want to say these are just a few of the outcomes, because as you hear how we want to structure this, the agencies that are selected, this will be a collaboration in terms of the final outcomes that are agreed to. But a few of them you will see is that we hope the EDs will, well, it will be expected that they'll create a work plan to improve organizational effectiveness. As you'll see in the eligibility criteria, one of the things that we're going to require is an organizational assessment. EDs will be engaged in professional executive development over a period of time throughout the pilot. We'll also expect that through the recommendation of the ED that key staff and board members will also be engaged in the training and the and networking. And then as we think, as a result of that org assessment, as we think through what operational areas have the greatest need, is that there will be a prioritization that will occur. So as organizations think about which operational areas are can they work in where they're going to have the greatest impact. And then part of the measurement will be looking at how the capacity has been increased through a post-test using, again, a similar assessment tool. So, eligibility criteria. To be eligible to apply, the ED and 50% or more of the staff have to represent communities of color. They themselves have to be persons of color. 50% or more of the clients served are low income and from communities of color. And the organization's mission statement has to be demonstrative and committed to serving low income communities of color. In operation for a minimum of 3 years, and then we say demonstrated stability in senior leadership, and by that we mean, so not just the ED, but even the kind of your key staff. So the goal is that what we don't really want to see is constant turnover there in the leadership roles. Having a stable financial history. The budget of the organization, $500,000 to $5 million. Now the reason for that range, when we conducted the focus groups and when we looked at the profile of the agencies that are currently funded by United Way, on average, the revenue size was roughly $2.5 to $5 million. While we also wanted to make sure that our currently funded agencies are eligible to compete, there's also a goal to touch and reach agencies that normally would not make the United Way radar. That's the reason for $500,000 to just under $2.5 million. And so our hope is to reach a different group of agencies, and it should also be noted that the agencies do not have to be funded by United Way. So this is open to both currently funded and non-currently funded agencies. And then the audited financials as required. Let me stop for a second. Any questions on the eligibility criteria? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Microphone. I'm sorry.
The mission statement has to specifically say that you're serving communities of color?
Yeah, at least it should be inferred. We'd like to see it so that we're convinced that might be one thing that we'll have to ask about through the process.
It is? Okay. So if your mission statement doesn't specifically say you're serving communities of color, but your board, your staff, the community you serve demographically is, because ours does say that, but historically for the last 40 years we have served communities of color, but we just say the communities we serve, which based on our geographic location and the people we serve are communities of color, but we just don't specify that. So does that make us ineligible?
So I would say make sure that you make the case in your application.
Okay, thank you.
So the organizational effectiveness, based on community and key community indicators that they help define, working with a consultant, this as far as the desired outcomes. Has the consultant already been selected? And the organizational development assessment, is that already done? And what are there specific key community indicators that you're looking for or expecting?
So the answer to your first question, the consultant doing the org assessment has not been finalized yet. It will be shortly. And regarding the key community indicators, that is part of the dialogue that will happen after the org assessment. So with the agency and with the United Way. So we will that will be part of the collaborative process.
Related to that question, in selecting this consultant, will you take into account the cultural competency that they will need to be able to work on this project?
Yes. Because of the webinar, that's why we need everyone in the mic.
I want to go back to your second, you don't have to go back, it's a simple question, but you used CI, and I'm not familiar with United Way, and I didn't know what the abbreviation CI stood for.
Oh, sorry. Community impact.
Right, thank you.
So the consultants, will they, I appreciate the question about cultural competency, but will those consultants or will they be a person of color from the various communities of the award winners? So will there be an African or African-American consultant for the African-American organizations, an Indian consultant for the Indian organizations, and so forth?
Okay. So let me, with the consultant piece, there are two different parts going on. So there will be a consultant used that we have to identify that will help us do the org assessment. And with that, we're also looking to the, as we think about which organization can help us with the org assessment, to the extent how looking for that cultural lens, cultural competence lens, and then also know that we will be closely involved in the process as well. So to the extent that we can do that with the org assessment, that will be done by one organization. Then there's the other piece, which is the actual program, once we get into the actual program, and the services that the agency will select. So for instance, if through that org assessment it's decided that their funding, they want to use their funding for HR, financial management pieces of it. Our goal is to have a group of agencies or organizations that agencies can select from to use that will be culturally competent or at least representative physically of the agency, all of the agencies. So what we're finding is that when we think about putting the core services together, it is almost impossible to work with one organization that's going to be able to provide all of the services needed. So we're leaning towards having what I'll call a preferred vendor list, and look to have that preferred vendor list representative of communities of color. Does that answer? And know that as we go through this, for those that, as we go through this, feel free that to share your feedback once we get into this, because know that, again, it's a pilot. I am flying it as we're building it, which is the beauty of it as well. So it's not so prescriptive that we can't take feedback. I think we'll take one more, and then we'll keep moving.
If you'll address this later, that's fine. But have you already thought about what kinds of evaluation strategies you'll be using, or what will be expected of grantees related to evaluation?
Yes. Well, actually, this is because we're looking at this as a 3-year pilot. There are specific things that we will look for coming out of year 1 year 2, year 3, and thinking about how to best measure those. So we know that year 1 is really about building and making sure the right supports are in place, and working with each agency to figure out what those supports are, and then how are we going to measure that. Year 2, obviously, we expect will look very different, as will year 3. You have another question? Yeah.
To build off the question about the providers, if an organization has a relationship with a consultant, strategic planning consultant who is from a community of color that they would like to build on, can they make the argument that they should be able to use that provider, or will you only consider off the list of preferred vendors?
Today we are looking at preferred vendors, that we have interviewed, and let me share why we're doing that. One of the things that we want to be able to do is be able to report on the outcomes in a manner that, as we're moving forward and thinking about how can we build upon this, how can we continue to attract other funders, but more importantly, how we show success and the importance of this sector. So that is one of the key reasons why we're looking at a set of vendors so that we're able to talk together as a group. Okay, we have time for more after. We have some questions and service offerings. The org assessment will be required. And again, required because we want the agency we want everyone to understand what's the agency doing, and be able to come to an agreement around what are the priorities that we're going to work on. And then we will design, you saw a few of the outcomes that we're going to be looking for. The other part of that will be working with the agency to prioritize which services are going to yield the greatest impact for that agency. And so we're anticipating from at least the more, what I'm calling the hardwired services, as you see up there, would be financial management, human resources, technology, fund development, kinds of things. The other part around the board development and governance, we're saying required because, again, that's part of the leadership development component. And we are also working on what that whole leadership in terms of getting the personalized coaching, mentors, executive mentors, and networking and peer learning. So that will also be a part of the pilot and services available to the agency. As a result of agencies being selected, the agency will sign, when I say partnership agreement, they will then, if you are not funded by United Way, you will become a United Way funded agency as a part of this pilot. And as a result, that agency will then participate in all of the offerings, trainings, events that come along with being a United Way funded agency, including the Council of Agency Executives. And again, as you see here, it's also expected the participation in individual coaching and peer training. So again, it's really all of the leadership development components that we would expect that ED and key staff to participate in. And when we say achieve agreed upon outcomes after the organizational assessment, that will become a part of the agreement. Whatever we agree to as outcomes will be a part of that. Contract, and then submit progress reports as required. So a few of the measures of success, as you can see, just financially stronger agency partner segment, and then again, we're looking at the group, what I'm going to call the inaugural group, as a cohort. So we will go through this together as a group, and we will look to this group to have key learning. So if we're fortunate enough to replicate this just with here, and also hoping to share learnings across the United Way system. But again, we will be looking to this first group. And again, you can see effectively produce desired outcomes, and as you can see, within the context of the individual cultures, which is why that collaborating around the org assessment is going to be critical. And then you see some of the other key measures of success. Question? Oops. ROI was a question, return on investment. Give you an idea. So, and the other thing you'll see a little bit different language that we're using, accelerator awards. And again, because we're getting away from, this is not a deficit-based pilot. This is a pilot where there are organizations, smart people doing great work that just need acceleration, access to resources and to support. So we want to make sure that that message resonates in the community, in this building, and among the agencies. So the online application process, again, starts today. So it's the application. Tom is going to go through that shortly. It's online now. It's live. And you have until, I think it's September 6th, but I think it's September 8th. It is September 8th that you have to complete it. You have, on the request, we're also calling this request for application because it is not as intense as the RFP. So it's not going to take us 9 months or 6 months, and thank God Megan's even reduced that part. But we're going even faster. I'm available for questions via phone, email, as are my colleagues back there. Finalist interviews will be the September 23rd through the 26th. That may either be in person or on the phone. But that's the time that the finalist interviews will occur. Award finalists will be announced the week of November 17th. Now, reason for that gap, just so you know, this is no different. This has the high attention of our board of directors. The award have to go, recommendations have to go, for those that are not familiar with the United Way process, and some are, has to go to our Community Impact Committee, which is a subset of our board, which approves every grant that goes out of this building. And this one is no different. It does have to go before our Community Impact Committee. And again, because of the newness, and it is a pilot, it will then go to our board of directors as an FYI. So once that happens, which I believe that's November 7th, we will then be able to release the finalists on the 17th, and they will be notified by email or by phone call. And then the funding will begin January 1st, 2015. So in between November and prior to the funding actually beginning, we will be tying up all the loose ends around contracts, preferred vendors, first orientation meeting, those kinds of things. When that will happen. So that's roughly the timeline, but the funding will begin January 1st, 2015. Questions? I see a couple.
I'm noticing on the notes that there was an intent to apply due last Friday. Could you explain what, not familiar with that, and is there still an opportunity to provide an intent
Great question.
to apply?
There was a deal, there was something online with an intent to apply. So let me answer the hard breathing question first. Yes, you can still apply. The reason the intent to apply was out there, we wanted to get an idea of how many applicants we would receive. Again, this is new for us. We had no idea of the number of agencies that are out there that are outside, or let's say under that $2.5 million revenue piece. So that was the primary reason. So you can apply. The only thing you have to do is meet the deadline, September 8th.
I just want to be sure about the budget. It's under $500,000 doesn't qualify to apply, right?
I'm sorry, say
Under the 500,000, I'm sorry.
the minimum
The
500,000.
minimum less than that, that's not going
Right,
okay.
right. This time around. Let me also say, one of the things we've talked about, and we're not sure how this will work, as we kick off this initiative, we understand that there will be agencies, even if they're not selected in this inaugural pilot, that still need the services. At least some of the, like board development, executive coaching. We're talking about how we might still make some of those services available. I know right now that's just a question that has come up, and actually it's come up from our board and others, asking that we give some thought to that. To be candid, no. Only because right now this is new, a pilot for us, and so we really have to think about what are the support services that are going to be needed, even for the $500,000 to $2.5 million, and being able to think about what are the differences between the two sets of agencies that we have now that we're introducing. So I think we're going to really focus our efforts on getting this right to the extent possible. Right here.
You mentioned there would be 2 rounds. Did I hear that you say that there's this first round, this inaugural round? Are you anticipating an additional round that would come, say, next year? That's one question. The other is, with this first round, are there certain criteria that you're especially interested in with the first inaugural group? Are you interested in a diversity of agencies that have the $5 million or under $5 million budget and operating budget, in addition to those that are $500,000? Are you looking for diversity in that, or what are you looking for?
So the first question, will there be 2 rounds? I said this being the first pilot, my hope is that we can have a second group. That's my hope. Again, because taking this first group through in a multi-year funding process, I really can't answer that until we have a better idea of available funding. But that is a hope, to be able to add to this initiative, and then really come up with a defined time frame. And so right now we're looking at least 3 years. So the second part to your question around the diversity within a diverse group, yes. We are striving to get the diversity in the cohort, both ethnically and by size. And that is going to be a challenge. We're not being naive about this, and looking at the number of dollars that we have available on the onset of this, we recognize that it's going to be a challenge to manage, but it's not a reason not to do it. So we'll do our best, and hopefully through some pretty strong efforts and compelling messages, we'll be able to continue to raise funds around this.
I'm thinking about an organization developing the budget part of this request and determining in that $25,000 to $100,000 window what they would ask for. I'm assuming that most of that money would be associated with the staff time needed to participate in the training, or what other kinds of costs do you see being part of that application process or the budget for the applicant organizations?
So the other parts of that budget and a good size of that really ought to be telling us kind of what do they need as they're thinking about their priorities around those capacity building efforts. What are the needs in that area, and what do they anticipate those costs to be? We're really looking at the capacity building side, not the cost of direct service or staff time associated with direct service. So, but even staff time with that, because again, this is going to be, I think, where it's going to be a challenge for the agency, because we recognize that there's going to be time, staff time needed to do that, but they're going to have to think about what it's going to cost to actually get the service. So if you need the HR support or the financial management support, and you're going to have to go out to get that through a vendor, there's a cost associated with that. So you really have to think about the cost and where that trade-off is going to be with the staff time. Because I think where the rub will be, the dollars can't be used all for staff time, and then there's nothing for the actual vendor, the actual service. And again, we know these are not, those are not easy, they're not easy decisions. Just as a thought, and I don't, when I was talking to the folks in California, and those agencies were a little different. They were all culturally specific agencies, but focused more on advocacy work. So they were able to measure around how many bills were passed, that kind of thing. Their average size grant was, I think their average size grant was like $40,000. So, but a little different. We still have a little different thing going on here.
When I read through this, I didn't see a requirement budget. When I read through this, I assumed that after you did the organizational assessment, you would meet with the organization to determine what services they needed.
Some agencies, I think on the form, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's a spot for people to put, to estimate a budget, but that will be reviewed in the org assessment as well. It will be reviewed.
So that's on the online form. It's not in the guidelines here. Okay.
Hi. We, at our agency, we know we have some very pressing and very pragmatic expenses that need to be met. Like, we know we need to improve our database systems. We know we need to make some repairs to our, to our building. We have a reasonably good assessment already of what is needed for us to move forward in what we need to be doing, but would those be all type of propositions?
I'm sorry, on the building?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not assuming that we can, get our boiler repaired through this, but things like needing to upgrade database systems to increase our billing capacities, such like that.
So I guess when you say your database, that would fall under the IT.
Okay, so that would be an allowable to propose in the budget.
Right. We're going to look at each organization, and to the extent that we can best understand the request and how that is going to advance that organization's mission, vision, and ability to deliver service in their community. Not looking at the service, but what is needed for that organization to be effective in their communities.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on?
I have a question. Can you kind of describe more in detail what goes on in the organizational assessment? It kind of said, I think, 4 hours. That just seems like a lot to accomplish in 4 hours. And kind of
that's an estimate.
Okay.
And so what we're going to be looking for is having an outside person actually talk to the agency about the work that they do, what their priorities are, just getting a real good feel for what that ED and their staff believe that they need to be effective and how they would prioritize that. And we felt it was important to have an outside person do it versus United Way do it. But it's really getting at the agency's needs and priorities. Any other questions, thoughts? Not, Tom's going to come up and take us through the online application. Oh, yeah.
Okay, I think we're actually okay. I'll use this one up here. Okay, you can just keep it. So I'm Tom Lands. I'm with Greater Twin Cities United Way. I'm in our IT department. And we're going to run through the actual sort of mechanics of how you guys are going to go out and complete the application. So real high-level steps. Actually, first, anyone here who's used our grants, applications, or proposal system? Okay, pretty good numbers. Anybody who was here last week for the education training and saw my very same spiel? Perfect. This is all review. For those of you who haven't or who are maybe a little bit rusty on it, we use a system called SharePoint where you and our staff will be looking at the same sort of pages, can see the same applications and the same forms. We can manage the forms from all the different organizations all at once. You on your end can also have multiple people in your organization contribute to the application and see your historical documents, things like that. So I'm just going to run through the real high-level steps of what you guys need to do to get through this. First, we say create your application team. Because you can have multiple people access the system, contribute to the application if you like to handle it that way. First, sort out who all may need to be in the system contributing there. Prepare to log in, and what we mean by that is request access to the system. There's a short form that you need to fill out telling us who you are, what organization you're a part of. We will sort of manually set that up, connect you to the right organization. You'll get back a username and password from us to get into the system. Then you actually log in, you start an application, you fill out all your information, you submit it when you're done. So real sort of high level. As far as preparing to log in, our system, SharePoint, is a Microsoft tool, so the very best browser that you're going to have the most consistent results with is going to be Internet Explorer. Most other browsers are going to work to some degree. There's some kind of quirks, like I know in Google Chrome, if you want to print a copy, it doesn't always print up as pretty as other browsers, or it may not expand well. So Internet Explorer is going to be your best browser to use. And then, so everyone, again, on your team who needs to access our system to contribute, we recommend that each individual person have their own login. I know we get lots of questions from organizations who have one login and they share it with everybody. Somebody forgets the password, they reset it. Somebody didn't update their Post-it note with their own password. It just typically works better if each person requests and gets their own access. And then, you know, if somebody leaves, we can turn people's access off. You can manage it on an individual basis rather than trying to remember who all knows our username and password to get into the system. So the link that we've got right here is to a form on our website where you can go in and request that access. And on the form, it's going to ask you your agency name, full name, email address. And that should be it. Once you fill out the form, sometimes can take a day, 2 days, depending upon how busy we are. You should get an email from us with that subject from support at Greater Twin Cities United Way. It's going to have the username that you gave us, your email address, and a password. That link is also on our website. That is going to be to, actually, that's to all of the information about the application. And then you can go to the grants proposal site, the application itself, which we'll take a tour of. Hey, Sarah. All right, so I'm going to log in with a test donor I have. And if you've had access in the past, this forgot username and password link will just automatically trigger a new username and password for you. All right. So from the informational page on our website, you can get to the, CSO application page, or we can go through here. A little bit of information on the application there. Leslie's contact information, Melanie's contact information. One time when you access this page, start a new application. Lots of information about the application itself. The first thing we recommend you do when you come in here the first time, just give your application a name. And then save it. You get our message, the application has been saved successfully. You can go back. We want to make sure we do that just in case there's no issue with your security, with the name that you gave it. We wouldn't want you to fill out a bunch of information, try to save it, not have that work. This should all be pretty straightforward then. Contact information up at the top. Eligibility questions should be dropped down yes, no. Once you choose whether or not you're a funded agency, you'll get an upload section. That's going to be different. If you're not a funded agency, there's other additional information we'll need on you guys. Narrative section there, organizational information. And then down at the bottom, references. We have save buttons along the way we recommend. This is a web-based system. We don't want you to get 2/3 of the way through the application, have your internet connection drop, something like that, lose a bunch of info. Once you're done, again, save the application. Once everything is done, you've done your internal reviews, one time you're going to submit. Let's skip that for now. Once you submit that application, we're going to come back to the library. The application status is going to say submitted instead of draft. You won't have access to change the application once it's been submitted. Excuse me. When you come back in then next, after you've submitted it or after, if the second person from your organization is going to make changes, you should see that application there. You can pull it up. All the information we provided before should be in there. And then also a lot of people for, printed purposes, saving your records, there's a print preview option up at the top. This is going to give a sort of printer optimized version of the form that you can save for your records. Any questions on that? One?
Two related questions. One is, are the text boxes character or word limited?
No.
Great. And are they relatively easy to edit in? Because many of these online applications are not, and so you have to create a Word document and cut and paste. How is this one in that capacity?
Yeah, they're going to be pretty simple, straightforward text boxes. So you can go in, edit, copy, things like that. In the past, we've instructed people that if you want to take these, do your editing outside in Word, share a Word document amongst multiple people. You can go ahead and do that and copy and paste into the text boxes. What you won't see is any fancy formatting like bolding, highlighting, bullet points, things like that. Those won't carry over into the text boxes. Yep. Anything else? Let's flip back. A few. And from here. All right, then just a few tips. Again, this is a web-based system. Internet connections go down, things like that. Make sure you're saving as you go along. As we mentioned, you can copy and paste from Word, but formatting will not come across. The scroll bar, that piece really isn't true for this one, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. I'm going to give you a detailed example of this, but you can have multiple people from your organization contributing to the same application, but it's not, if you use Google Docs, something like that, where it's real smart, you can see someone else's changes, things like that. This system isn't quite that sophisticated, so I'll explain to you how this can be, but you want to make sure you don't have multiple people sort of saving, overwriting each other's changes. And lastly, you want to make sure you close out when you're not working in the report actively, so that if someone else from your organization wants to contribute, you won't lose any changes there. Yeah.
I'm going to ask Sarah, also, if she'll just come up, say hello, our CEO, and he's been actually my boss, I'm working quite closely with you on this, just going to share a few words about the importance of this initiative.
Good morning, Leslie and Tom and all of you. I really hope, and I personally, as Tom can attest, I'm not really a good technology person, and it's hard to watch people click on a screen, but I want you to know two things. We fill out applications for federal grants and things like this too, so we've suffered through these computer applications, and we've worked really hard, and Tom has been one of our great leaders to simplify and make this a good process, or let me just say as good as it can be. So I hope you'll find the nuts and bolts of applying here for a grant at United Way, if you haven't done it before, to be tolerable. I won't say excellent, but at least tolerable on the computer side, and excellent on all other dimensions that we have slightly more human interaction on. I'm Sarah Caruso, and I'm President and CEO of Greater Twin Cities United Way. Leslie reports to me, and together with Leslie very much in the lead, we are the advocates and executive sponsors and cheerleaders for this work. And this is really an exciting day for, I think, both of us, because we have been on a journey, I would say, the past 18 months or so in our work here at United Way to better understand a couple of things. And I'm just going to sort of tell you what those are, and I think you'll begin to see how they have led to this moment. First of all, when we have been doing some analysis over the past 5 to 7 years about the program grants that we've been making here at United Way, particularly since we moved to our community impact strategy and the program funding, which we moved to in 2004. And one of the things we have seen as sort of an unintended consequence, and I really want to underline that word unintended, is that the number of smaller agencies that we have been funding has decreased. And it's decreased because we have a pretty high bar, because we're investing donor money in a rather business-like model. Workplace is a major place where we raise money. And what we don't want to happen, and has happened occasionally but not a lot, is for donor money to go into a program and then the agency sort of goes kaput and the program doesn't happen. So it's easier, right or wrong, sometimes to bank on a larger agency or a more established agency than a smaller and or more innovative one. So that's learning number one. Learning number two is we did some analysis about what has been happening to agencies during the Great Recession of 09 and 10 and after that. And we learned that smaller agencies were disproportionately hurt by the recession. More declines in individual giving, cuts at the federal level, and in fact, the bigger agencies got bigger. And public funds and through mergers, the bigger agencies got bigger, the middle-sized agencies are sort of bumping along, and the smaller-sized agencies have really taken a hit. And I see some nods, so I think some of you have lived through this. And thirdly, as we think about the terrible opportunity gaps or achievement gaps that are here in the Twin Cities that we all know about, and we think about what is our role at Greater Twin Cities United Way in this area, one of the things we know for sure is that culturally specific agencies, many of you in this room, are best at attacking those problems on the ground with specific constituencies or clients or populations, whatever word you want to use, that you know very, very well. And cultural authenticity is so important in being effective with many of our groups here in the Twin Cities. And many culturally specific organizations are quite small. So that's reason number 3, is that this strategy is very much part of an increased push that we're making to make sure that we are attacking the achievement gap as strongly as possible throughout our work, and finding the partners that are best equipped to do this work, and helping build the skills within the agencies and within the programs to assure that that work gets to as many people as possible. And finally, and all these 4 things have really been under Leslie's leadership, and forgive me if I'm repeating, I'm not quite sure where I'm coming into the story. Finally, we are aware and not very proud of the fact that there is a bit of history, legacy, and perception. Notice I didn't say reality, but perception that Greater Twin Cities United Way is not a very diverse or culturally competent organization as we are. And as I stand here as a white woman, I think the first thing I can say to you as CEO is I feel badly about that. That might sound sort of trite or simple, but I do feel badly about that, because I think the intent of our donors, competent or incompetent from a cultural authenticity point of view, is that United Way be an authentic community partner, that United Way deeply understand the issues of poverty and address them in the most efficacious way possible. There's also that naivete that can't we just fix this? Isn't this just a problem? And as you all know, and as I've learned more and more, and it's been 10 years I've been in the nonprofit field, there is no silver bullet. There's no one answer for educating a child. There's no one answer for helping an African-American boy have the self-esteem and determination he needs to get through those difficult middle and high school and young adult years. There's no way to just snap your fingers and have someone coming out of a criminal justice institution find a job. I mean, these are hugely complicated problems that we all kind of understand in our private lives as parents and family members and community members. But when we're trying to find the solution, I think we lose sight of the subtleties of the need for cultural competencies, of the need for small organizations and large organizations, of the need to do policy work as well as fund immediate, desperately important needs right on the ground. And United Way stands in the middle of all that. And we hear all, and this is the privilege of being one of the largest agencies in the Twin Cities and one of the largest United Ways in the country, is that there are high expectations placed on us. And to the extent we have not been as diverse on any dimension you want to pick, in our staffing, in our board, in our investment work, I am aware of those perceptions. We are working to address them. I'm pretty convinced we will never address and satisfy everyone's demands in this area probably for the next 100 years. We're going to be 100 next year, and we hopefully have another 100 years at least ahead of us. But what I hope you hear is an openness for improvement, an openness for deeper engagement, an understanding that it will benefit all of us if United Way works differently in its core work, as well as building some specialized programs like this one, and that I personally want to know how I, as CEO of this organization, can address these perceptions and or realities of not being open to the best ideas in the community and serving all people in our community. And I am available, and I cannot tell you how many informational interviews I do with people who want to get in nonprofit. And what I'd really like to do are some informational conversations with you and others in the community about how we can do a better job serving all of our population. So that is an open invitation to call me. I'm happy to buy breakfast, lunch, coffee, wherever it might be. And I hope that this program and Leslie's leadership of this program you will see as a very tangible step. It's not the first step, it's not the last step, but a really tangible step in our commitment to being an authentic, committed partner with you and the work that you're doing. So thank you for being here today, and know that we're very excited about this initiative. It has high visibility with our board. It has high visibility because we took funding from other areas and put it to this. It has high visibility because we hope to raise additional funding for this work beyond this grant round. And it's going to have high visibility this afternoon because we're going to tell the Star Tribune about it in an editorial board meeting. So we are really committed to this, and I have great confidence in Leslie's leadership, in Tom's leadership on getting the computer stuff right, and really look forward to hearing about the applications and the work that you're proposing with us. Thanks. Any questions for me?
We'll let Tom continue to take you through the application piece, and then we'll be wrapping up with any other questions that you have prior to going live.
Okay. Just a few additional points to leave you guys with. So I mentioned having multiple people working in the form at the same time. Here's just sort of a timeline example of what that would be. Let's say we start all the way over at the left with that first step. You know, we've told you to give your application a name, save it. If Susan comes back out there and opens it up at 8:07 and begins to fill out some narrative questions, she fills out the first couple, completes them. If while she's working, another person, if Carl opens up the application midway through, he's not going to see anything she's added because she hasn't saved it. He'll see that blank version with just an application name. Susan saves at 8:24. The first 3 questions are done. Carl comes back and saves the last question that he did. The only thing that we're going to see in that saved file is what Carl saved. And unfortunately, we don't have any way to recover those changes, things like that. So just you know, an additional warning. Most organizations who've used the system a few times are aware of this. They come up with a plan either for one person to be the point person to add all of their information into the application, or you know, they set a schedule. I'll work on it today, you work on it tomorrow, something like that. But just to make sure that you've got a plan for when things are going in there, so we don't potentially overwrite info. So once all of your fields are completed, once you're interviewed them, your executive director has reviewed and approved the application, hit that submit one time. You'll get back, you'll see the application in our library, it will say submitted. You don't have access to edit anymore. Unless you absolutely need, we can flip it back, open it up for you, but try and make sure that you're done before you hit that submit. So some resources. We do staff a support desk. Feel free to email us if you run into questions. We've got a phone number as well. There are a few of us who monitor that phone line. And then, you know, just last couple things. We've done grant applications before, so I know that you tend to push things off, do it when you absolutely need to do it. That application or the request for access to the system, depending upon how busy we are, sometimes it takes us a day or two to get all of those filled if it's a busy time of the year. So we don't want to say, you know, have you hit the system for the first time on September 7th, request it, and panic because we're not even potentially going to fill your request until 2 days later. So as soon as you get a chance, at least go out there, you know, start a blank application. You don't need to fill everything out, but make sure that your access is working fine. Make sure you can see the applications. You don't run into any other questions, things like that. Certainly much easier to handle those now in mid to late August versus, you know, Friday afternoon, the day before the applications are due. So any other questions or comments from folks who've used the system before? This is probably the, I don't know, 5th or 6th round of either applications or reports that we've used the system, so we've ironed some things out. We've got a group of individuals, I think, on your side who are pretty comfortable with it. We've had good success with it. So, cool.
Okay, well, so that's no other questions on how to actually apply online. As we've said now repeatedly, it is live and ready to go. So I'll just pause before we end. Are there any other questions? Question.
Okay. So I kind of have a question, just processing through this. So you'll do the kind of on-site assessment, come up with a plan, steps. What happens at implementation? Does that from the consultant? Are there going to be funds available to maybe create support staff, like to help the executive director implement, their plan? I'm just kind of curious about the implementation process of the plan that's created.
Okay, question around implementation. So after we make the selection of the awards, and then we will actually work with those agencies on getting an organizational assessment. Also, prior to that, what's also going on is what that award amount will be for that agency. And then looking at that org assessment, also thinking about where are they going to apply those funds and how best are they going to apply. Have to be thinking very intentionally around the services that they actually need. So if it's, when you think about the capacity building supports, HR, financial management, and if that agency doesn't have that service, or they need it augmented, it's the vendors that they're going to need the money for to actually pay for those services. It's expected on the board development governance side pieces. Those are the things that we, United Way, are working on and are negotiating separately, and that will be a part of the program that the agency applies for. So it's really looking at those true capacity building services and what you're going to need, and looking at the grant amount and how best to use those. So again, a lot of it can't be spent on internal staff. It's really going to have to be how are you going to use the external services to support the work that you need done. Does that make sense?
As far as the organizational assessment goes and the application is obviously happening before the awardee receives the assessment. If the assessment discovers things that should be changed that aren't in line with what's in the application, what's the idea as to how the assessment will then inform the plan for implementation of the work?
I think that would be part of the discussion. So again, they're not even looking at the application, and we're making decisions on the application, and once the org assessment is done, I think that's why we're emphasizing the collaboration around once that org assessment is done. United Way, I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, no, well, we think well, no, this is what your app said, we think you ought to do this. No, we're going to have that conversation based on that org assessment, and if you remember, come to an agreement what those outcomes ought to be.
This is kind of a budget-related question. So the anticipated award sizes are $25,000 to $100,000. Is that per year, or is that over the 3-year period? And I'm asking that in relationship to thinking about the use of those funds for the services, for those external services. Should we be thinking about those services on an annual basis, or should we be thinking about, okay, so we need HR services for 3 years, and here's how much so how do we think about the allocation?
That award that we're getting is per year. So this is the inaugural year, it's per year. So again, we're anticipating this is a multi-year effort, and Sharon and I have had that conversation because we know that we cannot start this and be effective and get anything done on a 12-month basis. And so the amount that we're looking at today is an annual amount. And that's why as we think about funding this over a 3-year period, the dollars, we have to think about where the dollars are coming from, and we're in the budgeting process now.
Considering this,
I'm sorry, did that answer? Okay.
Considering this is a pilot project, about how much time do you estimate that United Way will have an expectation that the agencies are providing kind of input time or face time with the cohort group or with the United Way's leadership on providing input and feedback on the effectiveness of the project? And who are you expecting to be interfacing with from the agencies?
Okay, let me take the latter part. Who we expect to be interfacing from the agency is the executive director and key board members where appropriate, because it's expected that the board members or your board will buy off on this, will endorse it, and support it. The person that you'll be interfacing with on the part of Greater Twin Cities United Way is myself, and perhaps maybe one or two of our board members, and even in some cases Sarah, but primarily me as the lead on the initiative. And then in terms of the amount of time, I think in the request for application, we give an estimate on the hours that we anticipate folks will have to spend over that over this first year. And again, it's an estimate because we're not, I'm not going to stand here and say it might not be less, it might not be more, but right now it's our best estimate given the research that we've done.
I'm a little bit confused on the 1 year versus 3 year. So when you say that you will be providing the 25 to 100K is for 1 year, but you're looking at doing this multiple years, would the same organization then be eligible for getting continuation funds, or would it be reapplication?
No, it will be the organizations that are in the first cohort, provided they meet their need.
Right, but if they do, so there's potential for
yes.
3 years of funding
yes. for this cohort.
Okay, great, thank you.
Just a quick question about your review process, and if you could speak to maybe who is on the member panel for the finalists, if you have that idea yet.
Sure. Lee is always a plant. But the folks that are on there, of course, myself, we have 2 of our board members that will be participating. And the reason they were selected is because of their experience in what we're calling investments and business startups, so to speak. So 2 of our board members will participate. Then we also have Kate Barr, and we're still to make sure the schedule works out with her. We have one of our program managers, Amy Lopez, who will be participating in it. And then it will be one of our larger agency partners, minority agency partners that obviously are not eligible for aren't eligible to apply for the initiative. So so we made sure that it was a diverse group, and even with our board members that we've selected, they're also diverse and a person of color. Any other questions?
I just have one question about the application information. There's an optional document section that talks about submitting performance data. I'm just curious what kind of performance data you'd like to see.
I would say, as opposed to what we'd like to see, what you think you want to send us in the way of your performance around capacity building, activity or track record of the agency that you think it's important. And that continues to help give us a complete picture of the agency. And again, we did that purposely, so if there's any other information that an agency thinks that will be helpful in telling us what you're doing, how you're going to use the funds, and the impact that you can have, we invite you to share that information.
Could you clarify the kind of funding mechanism? Like, for example, if we are selected and org assessment said we need to develop our fundraising strategies, and so we bought a fundraising software, then you're gonna kind of reimbursement that kind of cost, or so how that funding money kind of.
If that's a part of your priority, as we go through the org assessment, we sit down and talk and we prioritize. And if that's one of the items that we agree upon is going to accelerate or catapult the work that you need to do, then certainly that would be included. I mean, that is something that you would do and that you would be using a part of that grant, those grant dollars for. Again, I want to emphasize, while you saw some of the outcomes that we expect, it truly will be I want to keep saying, collaborative process when we really sit down with the agency and have a candid conversation on what we think, what we believe those priorities are, and what's going to get us, what will help get the agency through the first year. And I believe in the request for application, we also give an indication of even some of the deliverables that we would, that we would hope to see from an agency in year 1, year 2. So an example I think we placed in there, if in fact an agency today does not have a cash reserve, it's not necessarily going to be a mark against the agency, but as we continue this initiative or process, and we believe we're all doing the right things, it's expected that we would see a cash reserve, perhaps in year 2, and that we're starting to do the things to work towards that. So again, we're really looking at how can we best start to position the agency for sustainability over a period of, over the long haul. And again, we don't have unlimited resources, so even for us, we had, we're looking at our total investment and participation, and right now it looks like maybe 3 years. For sure, 3 years. I'm not sure we would go to 5 years, but for sure 3, because we know that best practices have told us, MAP, folks in California have all said you can't do this without at least a 3-year commitment. Any other questions before concerns? Okay, if not, I look forward to reading, talking, and again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, Tom, or anyone on the application. Thank you.